What we just heard, this section of Ecclesiastes, I believe serves as a final exhortation in the book right before the epilogue. The kind of clarity that comes at the end of the book, God willing, that we'll hear next week from Pastor Brett. All these weeks, about 15 weeks I think now, that we've been through this book, going through this book of Ecclesiastes. Maybe for many of you, you're like me. I had never studied this book in any kind of depth before, read it, but never with the kind of depth that we've gone through. And I just want to ask you, as we start, and we're coming to these last two sermons, have you learned anything? Have you become more wise? This is a wisdom book. Have you become more wise through this time? Have you been changed? Have you had more hope stirred in you? Remember Paul's words, Romans 15. Whatever was written in former days, that includes the book of Ecclesiastes, was written for our instruction, that through endurance and through the encouragement of the Scriptures, we might have hope. Not that we might just be able to discuss who the preacher is or the various points of the book, but that we might have hope. So this is for Ecclesiastes, this book written in former days for our instruction. So has it produced that in you? Has it increased the harvest of your righteousness? Has it made you more holy? Has it changed you? Pray that it would sink in. And even this morning. So now as we focus on this final exhortation before the epilogue, that's next week, I want to remind you briefly just of three themes that we've seen throughout the book that are going to relate very much with what we talk about this morning. Three themes that are evident throughout the book of Ecclesiastes. And those themes are the uncertainty of life, the judgment of God, and the inevitability of death. This is just kind of overview that ties together with what we're focused on in this passage. So Ecclesiastes has emphasized life's uncertainty. You've seen that. It's done it in many ways, right? It's all part of the futility and vapor of this world under the sun. Uncertainty. Sometimes a person who has toiled with wisdom and knowledge and skill must leave everything to be enjoyed by someone who did not toil for it. Chapter 2, verse 21. Sometimes in the place of justice and righteousness, even there is wickedness. Chapter 3, verse 16. Sometimes the righteous perish and the wicked prolong their life. Chapter 7, verse 15. And he says in chapter 9, verse 11, time and chance happen to everything. Uncertainty, it's a consistent theme throughout the book. Also, God's judgment is a repeated theme. Solomon tells us plainly, God will judge the righteous and the wicked. Chapter 3, verse 17. Though it may not seem to be the case in this lifetime, it will ultimately be well with the righteous and it will be ill with the wicked. Chapter 8, verses 12 and 13. Further, 7 times throughout the book, we are called to, in various ways, the fear of God. And part of that fear is the intimate knowledge that each person is accountable personally to God in judgment. And then finally, there's the inevitability of death. This is probably, if I were to ask you, one of the most memorable themes of this book. The inevitability of death. The same event happens to all mankind. Chapter 2, verse 14. All are from dust, and to dust all return. Chapter 3, verse 20. No man has the power to retain the spirit God gave him, the breath that God has put in him. Chapter 8, verse 8. Amid all the uncertainties of life that this book talks about, death is not one of them. Death is not in uncertainty. Death is a fixed certainty. When we sang that song, You Give and Take Away, we're not just saying that that's what happens. We're saying that God has the divine right, prerogative, to give and take away, to kill and make alive. It's his right to do that. And we, under the sun, feel the inevitability of death, and it's been highlighted in this book. So these three things, the uncertainty of life, the judgment of God, the inevitability of death, they tie together, I think, very well with the passage this morning. So the question I think that that this passage is answering is, in light of that, in light of those themes, life's uncertainty, God's judgment, death's inevitability, how should we live? How should you, in 2026, Christian, live? We'll take the passage in three main divisions related to those three themes. We're going to take our cues on how we divide this up from the commands that are given by Solomon. So first, invest. It's coming from cast your bread upon the waters. We'll talk about that in a second. Invest in view of uncertainty. That's 1, verses 1 through 6. Second, rejoice in view of judgment, verses 7 through 10. Finally, remember in view of death, chapter 12, 1 through 8. Invest in view of uncertainty, rejoice in view of judgment, and remember in view of death. That's the division that we're taking. Lord, speak and teach us. In the first verses, 1 through 6, I think they're getting at investment, and I think that it's taking place in these different images that he gives about the uncertainty of life, how we don't know what's going to happen in the future. I think the section basically jumps back and forth between the call toward a kind of bold investment and generosity and the reality of uncertainty and our ability to know the future. They kind of go back and forth. The main idea, I think, of this section is that the wise person is not paralyzed by uncertainty, but is diligent to make faith-filled investments. How many uncertainties lie ahead in 2026? So many. Corporately as a church, as a nation, personally in your own lives, just flooded with uncertainties. And this passage is saying the wise person doesn't get paralyzed by those. But the wise person is diligent to make faith-filled investments. So take those verses first that talk about the uncertainty and our inability to know the future. So verses 2 and 3 and then verse 5. Start there with me. Chapter 11, verse 2. Give a portion to 7 or even to 8. For you know not what disaster may happen on earth. If the clouds are full of rain, they empty themselves on the earth. And if a tree falls to the south or to the north, in the place where the tree falls, there it will lie. And jump down to verse 5. As you do not know the way the Spirit comes to the bones in the womb of a woman with child, so you do not know the work of God who makes everything. Uncertainty, inability to know the future, inability to know how all these things are working together. We don't know the disasters that might come upon the earth. Clouds full of rain empty on the earth, trees fall in the forest, things happen in the world that affect us, and sometimes they happen suddenly and they have ongoing consequences. Tsunamis, earthquakes, tornadoes, moral disasters of people murdering each other. These things happen and have ongoing consequences. And further, in the same way we don't understand how body and soul are intertwined in the womb, so we don't know the work of God. I think you could say that is, we don't know all of what God is up to in this world. He has told us some things very clearly. One of my favorite things to ask someone I haven't met before, to just talk to them about the Lord and ask them to start a conversation is, what do you think God is up to in the world today? It's really interesting to hear people's answers to that question. And one of the things I tell them is, one thing I know that God is doing in this world today is that he is reconciling the world to himself, not counting people's trespasses against them in Jesus Christ, 2 Corinthians 5. He has told us that he is up to that. But there's just so many things that we don't know in the mystery of his providence, right? So many things we will never comprehend. Now, interestingly here, in light of all that uncertainty, and even if there's disaster that comes, Solomon gives an encouragement to give a portion to 7 and then to 8. Precisely because we don't know what disasters might come. That's a very interesting reason for that. Normally, this works entirely the other way around, I think, right? The threat of uncertainty and disaster paralyzes people from releasing their resources in the life of faith. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what it's going to look like in 5 years. I don't know what the country is going to be looking like in a few years. Therefore, I'm going to hunker down, hold all my resources together, and all this generosity in this life of faith and giving a portion to 7 and 8 can go on the back burner. The saying goes, save it for a rainy day, right? There's going to be something that happens in the future. Save it for a rainy day. And it's like Solomon is saying, give it for a rainy day. Charles Bridges comments on this verse. He says, the covetous worldling uses as the only excuse for hoarding the very circumstance which Solomon produces as a motive to liberality, generosity. The one, the worldly person, applies it as a hindrance to godliness, the other as an incentive to it. So don't be frozen from godly investment by threat of disaster. This is one of the very things that's going to mark us as Christians, cause us to shine as lights in this world where time and chance happen to everything, Christians and non-Christians. Remember, Jesus says, make friends for yourselves by means of unrighteous wealth, so that when it fails, they may receive you into eternal dwellings. Luke 16. In other words, use your resources to invest wisely and generously in the face of impending calamity, so that when the wealth of this world fails, and fail it will, you will have made investments that have eternal value. There is an incredible exchange rate somehow in God's grace between what we have and what we do in this world and eternal riches. Remember, Jim Elliot said, he is no fool who gives what he cannot keep in order to gain what he can never lose. Investing, which I think leads us to Solomon's call toward diligent investment. And these are verses 1, 4, and 6. Verse 1, cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days. Verse 4, he who observes the wind will not sow, and he who regards the clouds will not reap. And then verse 6, in the morning sow your seed, and at evening withhold not your hand, for you do not know which will prosper, this or that, or whether both alike will be good. I think the image of cast your bread upon the waters, just thinking about that, it's not the most immediately intuitive image. Think about just throwing bread upon the water. The thing that I immediately think would happen is that a duck would come and eat it. Probably wouldn't come back to me in many days from now. But I think there's two main ways that you could understand this image. One is that Solomon is referring to agriculture and the practice of what's called floodplain sowing. It's basically where you cast seed on receding waters of a river like the Nile, so that they are deposited as the river goes down in fertile soil. Could be that kind of thing. Cast your bread, the seed of your bread, upon the receding rivers, the waters. Could be that. The other option is that he's referring to maritime commerce, so sending grain across the sea to trade and make a profit. And we know Solomon did this kind of thing. He sent out ships, and they brought back all kinds of stuff, animals and silver and gold. Either way that image is taken, I think the principle is the same. Solomon is exhorting us to a life of faith, a life where you make investment on things that you cannot see right now in the moment and trust that it's going to be worth it. There's going to be gain in this life of wise investment. And the other two verses, 4 and 6, emphasize diligence in our investments. Like the disciples, if you remember this in Acts, staring up into the sky after Jesus ascends, it does us no good to be paralyzed by overanalyzing the situations of our life to make sure it's the perfect situation for sowing. Remember what the angels said. They see Jesus ascend, and they're just staring up into heaven, and the angels say, "Why are you looking into heaven? This Jesus who ascended will come in the same way that he ascended back down to earth." They have a mission, right? They have a mission. There's never a perfect season for sowing, is there? You could always wait until another day when the weather is nicer, maybe the clouds are fuller. There is never a perfect time in the same way for investing eternally and sowing the seed of the gospel. It's never a perfect time for it. In other words, it's always going to be a more convenient time. There's always going to be a more advantageous moment, and we could play that excuse out all day long. You know, it's just not the right time in my life right now to be focused on giving to the poor. It's not the right time right now to be having this conversation with my brother-in-law. There's never a perfect time. Don't stare up into the sky. Don't observe the clouds just waiting for the perfect time. Don't get paralyzed by continually gauging where the winds of culture are blowing so that you'll know just precisely the right exact thing to say and the right moment to say it. You just get paralyzed. I got to watch enough podcasts before I can open my mouth to tell someone how great Jesus Christ is. Don't get frozen observing the looming clouds of news and politics and society. Act on the investments of God's kingdom that are before you, and you have them, brother, sister. You have them. Sow the seed that's in your hand today, and be indiscriminate with it. Isn't it amazing? There's a kind of indiscriminate sowing that's just put forward in the Gospels, where you just go and proclaim the gospel to the whole creation, and it falls on different soil, and God's the one who sorts that out. But he says, go. Who knows if you share the gospel with two people, if one will receive it, or none, or both? Who knows what fruit might bud this year from you meditating daily on the scriptures? And day after day, it seems like there's nothing coming. And then in a matter of hours, what God could turn around in a harvest of righteousness. So in the morning, sow your seed. In the evening, don't withhold your hand. Make diligent investments, faith-filled investments. And what is an investment? Just briefly. Simply, an investment is when you take something that you now have in your possession and you purposefully release it for the sake of greater gain in the future. That's financial, that's any kind of investment. That's just generally how it works. So you take the bread, in other words, that you now have in your possession, either cultivated as food or in seed form, and you release it, cast it on the waters, so that you will gain more than what you originally had. And you invest for what is going to be greater gain in the future. And if you just were to peruse through the Gospels, and we were to just take the time to study all four Gospels like this, you would see in the teaching of Christ, this is a regularly repeated topic. Investing. Matthew 6, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. Invest, lay up treasure in heaven. Or John 12, truly, truly, I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls to the earth and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. He's referring first and foremost to his life and death. He's the seed that goes down into the ground in his death and rises and bears much fruit. But then it applies to his disciples as well. He says, whoever loves his life loses it. And whoever hates his life in this world will keep it for eternal life. The greatest resource that you have altogether is your life. What will you do? Will you hoard it? Will you save it? Will you white knuckle hold on to it? Jesus says, if you do that, you'll lose it. You'll lose it. It'll be like a bag full of stale bread that's just thrown away. Or will you cast it on the waters? Will you make a wise investment of your life for the sake of the greater gain of the kingdom of heaven? Will you cast the bread of your years, resources, and energy upon the trustworthy word of Christ and believe that you will find it after many days? God is trustworthy, and he has said that you will. Rely upon him and his promise. So, investment in view of uncertainty. But Solomon also speaks of rejoicing. Rejoice in view of judgment. This is verses 7 through 10. Start off with verses 7 and 8. He says, light is sweet, and it is pleasant for the eyes to see the sun. So if a person lives many years, let him rejoice in them all. But let him remember that the days of darkness will be many. All that comes is vanity. Have you ever been gloomy and downcast and walked outside on a mild April day? Those days are awesome in Minnesota. You don't get too many of them usually. Take a few steps out the door, it's like 65 degrees. After a long winter, you guys know what I'm talking about. You step outside after a long winter, you feel the sun just kissing your skin, warming you. And it's like, I've never missed the sun so much. It's beautiful. Like you just take this moment and you look up toward the source of where that warmth is coming from. You just shut your eyes and you just breathe deep. Thank God for the warmth of the sun and the light. It's a sweet thing. It's a wonderfully refreshing thing. To see the sun, to experience the springtime of life. These moments and experiences are pleasures that sweeten life. They're a good gift from God. And if this life was all that existed, this life under the sun, we would do well to bottle up as many moments like that as we could and never allow the dark clouds of mortality to enter into our consciousness. Just thrust them away as soon as they come. But Solomon purposefully, if you noticed, brings a minor chord into this song of rejoicing. If a person lives many years, let him rejoice in them all. But let him remember that the days of darkness will be many. There's the minor chord. I think at this point he's primarily speaking to young people. He gets there in the next verses, and then in chapter 12, it's explicit. But just like the book of Proverbs, there's passages that are especially geared towards young people. My son, listen to my teaching, so forth. But this is certainly for all believers, timelessly profitable. for all of us. The days of darkness are referring to the decline of life, leading all the way up to death and the grave. These days, Solomon says, will be many. And Solomon especially wants the young to take this to heart. So young people, listen up to this. The preacher, this man who had all this wealth and years and wisdom and knowledge, wants you to take to heart in the dawn of your life, in the springtime of your life, that winter's going to be long. The days of darkness are going to be many. Let it sober you. It's easy to rejoice when you are in the springtime of life, in youth. And you think wrinkles and cellulite and bent backs and muscular atrophy and loss of hearing and death are never going to touch you. Now, of course, you would never say that. None of us would say that. But we can start to think that way, especially when we're young. But why then darken that rejoicing with such an exhortation as he just gave? Why not just let the young people be happy, right? Well, the answer is in verses 9 and 10. This is what he's after, I think. Rejoice, O young man, in your youth. Let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Walk in the ways of your heart and the sight of your eyes, but know that for all these things God will bring you into judgment. Remove vexation from your heart and put away pain from your body, for youth and the dawn of life are vanity. The main reason the preacher, Solomon, introduces the minor chord into that song is that the springtime of life is primed for forgetting your Creator. It is prime time. It is a season of life where we are especially prone to forget our Creator. That's why he's exhorting there especially. How many young people have fallen, turned away from Christ the same years that they have risen to adulthood? Happens all the time. You all have stories of it. The end of childhood comes, new adventures and strength emerge, and a sense of limitless opportunity just kind of floats along in this continual meditation. Just think all these things. What might be? The thrill of being alive, making new friends, experiencing new things, discovering romance and attraction and love, going off to college. All these easily overtake you. And Solomon says, rejoice in it. Rejoice in it. It's a wonderful season of life. The glory of young men is their strength, right? Rejoice in it. But remember something else as well. Every prideful glance, every romantic fling, every act of careless speech, every late-night party in a dark dorm room will be called into judgment, into the bright day of judgment. This is much joy and rejoicing to be had in the pleasures of youth. But this life is not all there is. There's a Creator. There is eternity. There is an everlasting soul. There is a gospel. There is a day of judgment. There is a life to come. And therefore, the young and all of us do well to remember the days of darkness in this vaporous life. Think about this, especially young people. It will temper you to consider how the beautiful woman or man, handsome man, that you are now infatuated with will one day be covered in wrinkles and possibly wearing a diaper. That will temper you. It will sober you to remember that no matter how strong and impressive you are right now to your peers, There is a day coming, if God gives you breath, that you will not be able to lift yourself out of your bed. Young person, do you consider the days of darkness, the days of your decaying body, the days of your dwindling strength, the days of your failing organs? And if you were wise, you would look at and learn from people around you who have lived longer, and you see them going through this season of life. And you would think, there's only 50 years that separates me from that. The days of darkness. Do you consider them? Do you consider that all your pleasure and enjoyment will be brought into judgment? All of it. Just allow that thought to rest upon you. All of it brought into judgment. Listen to how the Apostle John describes what Solomon was talking about, but in a fuller revelation, the day of judgment. Then I saw a great white throne, and him who was seated on it. There he is, the Creator. From his presence, earth and sky fled away, and no place was found for them. And I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne. There you are, right there. And books were opened. Then another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged by what was written in the books according to what they had done. And the sea gave up the dead who were in it. Death and Hades gave up the dead who were in them. And they were judged, each one of them, according to what they had done. And then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death, the lake of fire. And if anyone's name was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. That is a fixed day spoken of throughout all the scriptures, coming in a brighter clarity right here at the end of the Bible. Yes, rejoice in your youth. Enjoy the springtime of life. It is a gift of God. But can I entreat you, don't enjoy it as one of his enemies. Enjoy the springtime of your life as one of God's friends. Enjoy the springtime of your life as one whose name is written in the Lamb's book of life. In other words, live in such a way and enjoy your youth in such a way that you won't have regrets in 50 years, in 100 years, in 1,000 years. And finally, remember in view of death. This is verses 1 through 8 of chapter 12. The final passage continues its focus on youth as a season primed for forgetting God. In poetical form, the preacher delivers an ominous reflection that is all meant to highlight this one exhortation that he gives right at the beginning. Remember your Creator. Remember your Creator. Young people, if you're looking for a good place to memorize in Scripture, I would say Ecclesiastes chapter 12 would be an excellent one. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth. So listen again. I'm going to read it all. Listen again to what Solomon says. Remember also your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come and the years draw near, of which you will say, I have no pleasure in them. Before the sun and the light and the moon and the stars are darkened and the clouds return after the rain. In the day when the keepers of the house tremble and the strong men are bent, and the grinders cease because they are few, and those who look through the windows are dimmed, the doors on the street are shut, and the sound of the grinding is low, and one rises up at the sound of a bird, and all the daughters of song are brought low. They are afraid also of what is high, and terrors are in the way. The almond tree blossoms, the grasshopper drags itself along, and desire fails, because man is going to his eternal home, and the mourners go about the streets. Before the silver cord is snapped, or the golden bowl is broken, or the pitcher is shattered at the fountain, or the wheel broken at the cistern, and the dust returns to the earth as it was, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. There's a famous scene in a book called Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy that depicts a little bit of this. The main protagonist, Anna, is reflecting with kind of like longing and envy on the days of her youth with this friend of hers who is younger than her and is just kind of coming into that season. And this is what Anna says, the main protagonist. Quote, "Oh, how good to be your age," Anna went on. "I remember and know that blue mist, the same as in the mountains in Switzerland, the mist that envelops everything during the blissful time when childhood is just coming to an end, and the path away from that vast, cheerful, and happy circle grows narrower and narrower, and you feel cheerful and eerie entering that suite of rooms, though it seems bright and beautiful. Who hasn't gone through that?" End quote. Anna describes coming out of childhood into this dawn of life, the springtime of life, as a blue mist that envelops everything. There's anticipation and mystery just shrouding your life. There's the thrill of imagining what might be in the days to come. Anna looks with nostalgia, envy even, on those days that her friend is right now entering. These are the days of youth where rejoicing comes easy. The blue mist. But as the protagonist exemplifies in the story, evil days soon come where she has no delight in them. After repeatedly forgetting her Creator in the days of her youth, Anna eventually descends into utter despair and darkness. And the constant state of her existence is regret. Young person, brother, sister, church family, remember your Creator. Remember him before the evil days come in which you have no pleasure in them. Listen again to some of Solomon's descriptions of what those days will be like. I believe many of the things that he says are allegories of the aging body. Remember your Creator. Before the sun and the light and the moon and the stars are darkened and the clouds return after the rain. That is, when gloom surrounds your life and the pleasures you once enjoyed bring no sweetness to you. Remember your Creator. Before the keepers of the house tremble, and the strong men are bent, and the grinders cease because they are few, and those who look through the windows are dimmed, and the doors on the street are shut. That is, when your ability to maintain your own body fails, when your strong back becomes hunched over, when your teeth are grinded down or missing, when your eyes can no longer see clearly, when common exchanges with other people are no longer feasible. Remember your Creator. Before you are afraid also of what is high, and terrors are in the way. The almond tree blossoms, the grasshopper drags itself along, and desire fails. That is, when you are afraid to walk up a hill, or even take a stroll down the street because you are so feeble. When your hair turns white like a tree covered with almond blossoms. When your body drags along without the energy and elasticity you once enjoyed. When desire fails. Literally, when the caperberry crumbles. That's what it says in the Hebrew. A caperberry was known in the ancient world to be an aphrodisiac. So desire, delight. The caperberry crumbles. All that desire, all of it, just dries up. It's gone. Remember your Creator, brother, sister, young person. Before the silver cord is snapped, or the golden bowl is broken, or the pitcher is shattered at the fountain, or the wheel broken at the cistern, and the dust returns to the earth as it was, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. That is, when every vestige of the vitality of youth is severed. When the golden days of enjoyment are irretrievable, when your body is so hopelessly decayed that you can no longer draw from the desire and delight that once filled you. When at last your body and soul are separated, and the face that was once lit up by pleasure becomes a spectacle of horror in the corruption of the grave. It's vivid imagery. It's sobering. It's meant to be that. Finally, remember your Creator. Remember your Creator in all of these things, in the days of darkness that are coming. When you will say of those days, I have no delight in them. Remember your Creator also, because in Him alone there is hope. And winter is not the end of the story. Remember your Creator, because through the grace of Jesus Christ, though our outer self is wasting away, our inner self is being renewed day by day. Remember your Creator, because this light momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory that is beyond comparison. Remember your Creator, because we know that if the tent of our earthly home is destroyed, we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. Remember your Creator, because Jesus Christ has secured a glorious resurrection for all who live in the light of His gospel, where the silver cord in eternity will never be snapped, where the golden bowl of your fellowship with God and your life with Him will never be broken, where the pitcher, where you draw water from the wells of salvation, will never be shattered. Remember your Creator. Remember Him in the hope that He is given in Jesus Christ.